All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive.
Yeah, great to be back.
Today, we're going to be looking at some really fascinating articles that I found in the Hindu,
Oh, yeah, I saw those.
and they're all about the Brahmaputra River.
Right.
And, for anyone listening who is maybe preparing for the UPSC mains and prelims,
For sure.
the Brahmaputra is definitely one of those geopolitical hotspots that
Absolutely.
you really got to,
You need to know.
you need to have a good grasp of.
Yeah.
So we're going to really try to understand, what's going on with this situation, because China is planning to build this huge dam
Oh, yeah, it's a massive project.
on the Yarlung Zangbo,
Hmm.
which is the Brahmaputra source
Right up in Tibet.
up in Tibet, exactly.
Yeah.
And, this has kind of set off some alarm bells, I think, in India and Bangladesh.
Understandably, yeah, downstream there's a lot of concern.
Yeah, and it's not just about the environment, although that's a huge part of it.
Of course.
There are some serious legal and geopolitical implications as well. So let's kind of dive into that. And what struck me first when I was reading these articles was, it's easy to just say,
Yeah.
China wants this dam for energy.
Right. They need the power.
Right. But when you think about it, for India and Bangladesh,
Yeah.
the Brahmaputra, it's not just a river.
It's a lifeline.
It's
yeah.
their lifeline. Exactly.
Millions and millions of people depend on that water.
For agriculture, for drinking water. I mean, it's even a part of their culture and their traditions.
Absolutely. It's woven into the fabric of life there.
So you can imagine when China, the country upstream, decides to build something this massive,
Yeah.
people downstream are going to get a little bit nervous.
You can't blame them.
Not at all.
There's so much at stake.
Exactly. So then the question becomes, okay, what are the rules of the game here?
Right. What's the legal framework?
Exactly. And this is where it gets really interesting, because as I was reading, I found out that neither China nor India
This is key.
has actually signed the UN Watercourses Convention,
Right.
which seems like the obvious starting point, right?
Yeah. You would think. So it's the main international treaty on how to share water resources fairly.
Exactly. So what does that mean for this whole dispute?
Well, it definitely makes things a lot more complicated.
How so?
Well, you see, the UN Watercourses Convention is all about this idea of equitable and reasonable use.
Okay.
And cooperation, countries working together to manage shared water resources.
That makes sense.
But without that treaty in place, we're basically left with this patchwork of customary international law.
Okay, so it's not as clear-cut.
No, not at all. I mean, there is this general principle that you shouldn't cause significant harm to your neighbors.
Right.
But proving that harm, that's a whole other challenge.
Ah, so it becomes more about interpretation and negotiation.
Exactly. And to make matters even trickier, those agreements that China and India used to have about sharing water data.
You're talking about the MARUs, right?
Yes, the Memoranda of Understanding.
Yeah.
Those have lapsed, so they're not even sharing information as much as they used to.
Oh, wow. So it's like trying to solve a puzzle, but you're missing some of the pieces?
Exactly. And then there's this other thing called the expert level mechanism.
Right, the ELM?
Right. Which is basically a platform for dialogue between the two countries.
Okay, so that's got to be a good thing, right?
It is. It's definitely a step in the right direction, but it's not a magic bullet.
In what sense?
Well, it's not legally binding, you see.
Ah, so it's more about communication than enforcement.
Exactly. They can talk all they want, but there's no guarantee that they'll actually reach an agreement.
And given the scale of this dam project
It's enormous.
and the existing tensions between India and China,
Right.
this is not going to be an easy negotiation.
Not at all. This is a high-stakes game of diplomacy, and it's only just begun.
And it's not just the political tension that's worrying.
Right? No, there's something else even more concerning.
The articles in the Hindu pointed out that this dam
Yeah,
is being built in one of the most earthquake-prone areas in the world.
it's a scary thought.
That sent chills down my spine, I have to admit.
Yeah, I mean, building a megadam in a seismically active zone like the Tibetan Plateau,
Right.
it's inherently risky. We're not just talking about minor tremors here.
Right.
We're talking about the potential for catastrophic landslides.
Oh, wow.
And even these things called GLOFs.
GLOF?
Yeah, glacial lake outburst floods.
I've never even heard of those.
Imagine a glacial lake suddenly bursting,
Oh, wow.
sending this massive wall of water surging down the Brahmaputra.
That sounds terrifying.
It would be devastating for downstream communities.
Especially in Arunachal Pradesh and Assam, right?
Exactly. Those areas are already vulnerable to flooding.
Right.
But a GLOF would be on a whole other level. We could be talking about massive property damage and potentially even loss of life.
So we've got this whole web of factors at play here.
Yeah, it's complicated.
You've got China's need for energy. You've got the water security concerns of India and Bangladesh.
Right.
You've got this unclear legal framework.
And the ever-present threat of seismic activity.
Right, it's like a ticking time bomb.
In a way, it is.
And on top of all of that, we can't forget that the Brahmaputra is not just a water source.
Of course not.
It's an ecosystem.
An incredibly rich and diverse ecosystem.
Exactly. It's teeming with life, and some of those species are endangered.
Absolutely. The Gangetic River dolphin, for example.
Right.
And all sorts of migratory birds.
And building a dam like this is bound to disrupt that natural flow.
It's inevitable. It changes everything.
From the way sediment is deposited.
Which is crucial for agriculture downstream.
Exactly.
To the migration patterns of fish.
Like a domino effect.
Precisely. You can't just dam a river of this magnitude without there being consequences for the entire ecosystem.
So it's not just a question of whether there'll be enough water.
Right.
It's also about what kind of water.
The quality of the water.
Exactly. And how the entire ecological balance of the region will be affected.
It's a multifaceted challenge with far-reaching implications.
And I think for our UPSC aspirants out there,
yeah, this is gold.
This is a perfect example of how a current event can become a major topic in the exams.
Absolutely, especially for the mains paper.
So if you're finding this deep dive insightful,
yeah,
hit that like button, subscribe for more episodes like this.
Don't forget to leave your comments too.
Exactly. We'd love hearing your thoughts.
And any questions you might have about this really critical issue.
Because before we start talking about potential solutions and what this means for India's diplomatic approach,
right,
I think it's really important to appreciate just how complex the situation is.
It's fascinating.
Really. It really is. It's like this real-world case study of how environmental concerns,
international law,
geopolitics.
That's all intertwined.
It's all intertwined.
Yeah.
And it's not an easy puzzle to solve, but that's what makes it so interesting to analyze.
Absolutely. It's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity to learn and to think critically about these global issues.
Exactly. And that's what we're all about here on the Deep Dive. So stay tuned.
Okay.
So we've talked about the challenges, right? The potential water scarcity, the ecosystem disruption, the geopolitical tension. It's a lot.
It's a complex situation for sure.
So for our UPSC aspirants out there thinking about those essay questions.
Oh, those mains exams.
Exactly. How do you even begin to solve a problem like the Brahmaputra? Is there any way to find a win-win here, or are we just headed for conflict?
Well, I wouldn't say it's hopeless, but it definitely requires some creative thinking.
Okay, so what's the first step?
One crucial starting point, I think, is reviving those data sharing agreements between China and India.
Ah, so getting those MAUs back on track.
Exactly, because if you're going to cooperate on managing a shared resource,
right,
you need to have a shared understanding of what's actually happening.
That makes sense. So what kind of data are we talking about here?
Oh, everything, water flow measurements, rainfall patterns, projections of future water availability.
Wow, so a lot of technical stuff.
It's very technical, but it's essential for making informed decisions.
Right, because you can't really trust each other if you're not sharing the data.
Exactly. Transparency is key. Both sides need to be confident that they're working with accurate and complete information.
Okay, so data sharing is step one. But data alone doesn't solve the trust issue, does it?
No, of course not. Data is the foundation, but it's the dialogue that builds the bridge.
So how do you actually build that trust?
Well, I think strengthening the expert level mechanism, or ELM, is really important.
Right, that platform for communication we talked about.
Exactly. But imagine if it evolved into something more than just information exchange.
Okay, so what do you have in mind?
Well, it could be a platform for joint research, for example.
Ah, so scientists from both countries working together.
Exactly. Or for collaborative planning.
So maybe coming up with joint strategies for water management.
Right. And even for conflict resolution.
So like a neutral space where they can work out their differences.
Precisely. So the ELM can be a really powerful tool if it's used effectively.
So you're saying that a more robust ELM could be a game changer?
I think it has the potential to be.
It's like upgrading from a casual chat over tea to like serious negotiations.
Right. With clear goals and outcomes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's not just about talking. It's about actually making progress.
And while we're on the topic of making progress, it's also important to remember that the dam's construction is already underway.
Right.
But it's not too late to make adjustments.
Adjustments to the dam itself.
Yes. Think carefully calibrated water releases during crucial agricultural seasons.
So making sure that there's enough water for farmers downstream.
Exactly, taking into account the needs of those communities.
So it's about finding ways to balance China's energy goals with the water security needs of its neighbors.
Exactly. Finding that sweet spot.
Are there any examples from other parts of the world where this kind of cooperative approach has actually worked?
Oh, absolutely. There's the Indus Water Treaty between India and Pakistan, for example.
Wow, India and Pakistan.
Yes, despite all their history of conflict,
Right.
they actually managed to negotiate a treaty on water sharing that's lasted for over 6 decades.
That's pretty amazing considering their relationship.
It is. It's a testament to the fact that even in the most complex geopolitical situations, cooperation is possible.
So how does it work? What makes the Indus Water Treaty so successful?
Well, it's a very well-structured agreement.
In what sense?
Well, it establishes a clear framework for data sharing.
Okay.
It sets up joint management institutions.
So both countries are involved in the decision-making.
Exactly. And crucially, it includes a mechanism for resolving disputes.
So if there's a disagreement, they have a way to work it out.
Right, without resorting to conflict.
So it's like a model for how to handle transboundary water issues.
In a way, it shows that it's possible to find solutions that benefit everyone.
That's encouraging, but I can't help but think about those seismic risks we talked about earlier.
Of course, that's always a concern.
Even with all the best intentions and the best agreements, what happens if there's a major earthquake or a GLOF?
That's where disaster preparedness comes in.
Okay, so what does that look like in practice?
Well, we're talking early warning systems.
So people have time to evacuate.
It's exactly. Coordinated evacuation plans that actually transcend borders.
So India and China working together to get people to safety.
Precisely.
Right.
And joint exercises between disaster management agencies.
So they're prepared to respond quickly and effectively.
Right. It's all about minimizing the damage and saving lives.
So it's not just about building a strong dam,
No, it's about building a resilient system.
a system of cooperation and response.
Exactly. And that involves not just governments, but communities as well.
So people on both sides of the border need to be informed and prepared.
Absolutely. Imagine a scenario where real-time data on dam safety is shared directly with communities downstream.
That would be amazing.
It would empower them to take timely action in case of an emergency.
Right, knowledge is power.
Exactly. And it builds trust.
So we've talked about data sharing, dialogue, disaster preparedness.
It's a multi-pronged approach.
But there's one more piece of the puzzle that we need to address.
The elephant in the room.
Exactly. The broader geopolitical relationship between India and China.
Right. How does this water dispute fit into that larger context?
Because, let's be honest, there's a lot of tension there.
There is. It's a complex relationship with a lot of history.
So is this water dispute going to make things worse?
It could, but it doesn't have to.
Okay, so how can we prevent it from escalating into a bigger conflict?
Well, I think the way this dispute is handled could actually be an opportunity to build trust.
Really? So the Brahmaputra could actually be a bridge between India and China.
It's possible. Think about it if they can find a way to cooperate on this issue.
Right.
To find solutions that benefit everyone.
It could spill over into other areas of their relationship.
Exactly. It could set a positive precedent for future cooperation.
So it's a high-stakes gamble, but the potential payoff is huge.
It is. It's a real test of diplomacy and leadership.
And for UPSC aspirants out there,
This is where it gets really interesting.
this is where you need to start thinking critically about India's role in the region.
Exactly. How can India use its influence to steer this dispute towards a more positive outcome?
What are the pressure points?
The areas for compromise.
The opportunities for those win-win solutions?
These are the questions that future diplomats and policymakers need to be grappling with.
Because this isn't just an academic exercise.
No, this is real life.
The decisions made today will have a real impact on the lives of millions of people.
And on the future of the entire region.
So as we move on to explore potential solutions and what this all means for India's diplomatic approach,
Stay engaged.
remember that the Brahmaputra dispute is not just a distant geopolitical event.
It's a story that's still being written.
And your understanding of this issue could one day contribute to shaping a more sustainable and peaceful future for everyone involved. We've talked about data sharing and diplomacy and even disaster preparedness, but there's another layer to this Brahmaputra puzzle
Oh,
that
yeah.
I think is really important for our UPSC aspirants to consider.
Definitely.
And that's the potential for regional cooperation.
Right.
Could this water dispute, with all its complexities, actually be a catalyst for greater integration in South Asia?
It's an interesting thought, isn't it?
It is. I mean, the Brahmaputra doesn't really care about political boundaries, right?
Exactly. It flows through China, India, Bangladesh, connecting their fates in a very real way.
So you're saying that a shared challenge could actually create a shared sense of purpose.
It's counterintuitive, I know, especially given the history of tensions in the region.
Right, exactly.
But think of it this way. If these nations can find a way to work together on managing the Brahmaputra,
Yeah.
to share data, to coordinate their actions, to find solutions that benefit everyone,
Yeah.
it could build a level of trust
Okay.
that spills over into other areas.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. It's like building a bridge one brick at a time.
Exactly.
Start with water management, and maybe that leads to greater cooperation on trade, on security, even on cultural exchange.
It's about creating a virtuous cycle.
But let's be realistic. What are the main roadblocks to achieving this kind of regional utopia?
Well, utopia might be a bit of a stretch.
Okay, fair enough.
South Asia has its fair share of obstacles, let's be honest.
Right. Decades of mistrust, border disputes, political rivalries.
With a lot to overcome.
It's like this tangled knot of historical baggage.
Exactly.
So how do you even begin to untangle that?
Well, it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation, isn't it?
What do you mean?
Progress on one front can create momentum on the other.
Okay.
So if you can get a successful cooperative framework going for the Brahmaputra,
Yeah.
it could build trust, demonstrate the benefits of working together, and maybe even pave the way for resolving those other sticking points.
So the Brahmaputra becomes like a testing ground for a new kind of regional diplomacy.
Exactly. It's a high-stakes gamble, but the potential payoff could be huge.
And for our UPSC aspirants, this is where you really need to put on your analyst hats.
Yeah, think critically.
What would a truly effective regional water management strategy look like?
What are the essential elements?
How can India, given its position in the region, play a leadership role in bringing these countries together?
These are the big questions.
And remember, this isn't just theoretical.
No, it's very real.
This is a real-world issue with real-world consequences for millions of people.
Absolutely.
The Brahmaputra story is still being written, and the decisions made today will shape the future of the region for generations to come.
It's a pivotal moment.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the Brahmaputra River and China's Megadam project,
Yeah, it's been a fascinating discussion.
I encourage all of our listeners to go beyond the headlines.
Do your own research.
Delve deeper into those resources that we've mentioned, especially those insightful articles in the Hindu.
They're a great starting point.
And this is just the beginning of the conversation.
Right. Keep learning.
Keep asking questions, challenge assumptions, and think critically about these complex challenges.
The world needs your engagement.
If you enjoyed this deep dive, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more thought-provoking discussions.
And don't forget to leave your comments below.
We love hearing your thoughts and answering your questions.
Until next time, stay curious and keep those brains buzzing.
And best of luck with your UPSC preparations.